So Kim, we're here to talk today. This interview will be going out on the 10th anniversary of the death of your sister, Jo Cox. And we just wanted to talk to you about Jo the person. What was Jo like growing up?
Well, thank you for doing this, and I'm always really happy to talk about Jo. Jo was genuinely the nicest, kindest, most lovely person you could hope to meet. She was full of compassion, she was full of goodness. We were incredibly close when we were growing up as sisters. There were just the two of us. But don't get me wrong, she could also be pretty annoying as well.
I have a sister.
Yeah, exactly. and siblings always have that sort of relationship where we love each other dearly, but bloody hell, you are annoying me. But she was very good at forgetting birthdays and things like that. So I was always the one who had to remind her what was happening with things like that. But she was just lovely. And you will not hear, I've yet to hear anybody say a bad thing about Jo. And that doesn't mean you might have always agreed with what she believed or thought, and that's absolutely fine. But she was just full of goodness. And she was also, as her children are, annoyingly good at everything. So she was academic, she was sporty, she was good fun to be around, and she was very humble as well. She didn't have any ego, she didn't have any sense of self-importance, and she was also actually very shy. So when we were growing up, she would sort of push me forward, even though I was the younger one, to say, oh, Kim, can you just ring for the takeaway, or can you get the bus timetable, or whatever. And actually for me that makes what she went on to achieve even more impressive, because she did have to battle with self-confidence over the years. But she was just a thoroughly lovely person, and she just wanted to do good things in the world.
Tell us, you said that you would have your fights and stuff. So do you have a particular anecdote that you remember?
No, I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't say we did fight at all, actually. We were very close, and we were, even though there was 2 years between us, we were brought up by our parents as though we were the same age.
Right.
So we shared lots of the same friends. I always used to get a bit jealous because she did always get the best looking boys. So that was always a bit of a problem. But no, we just were very close. And, I remember playing out when we were little kids, whether that was on our BMX bikes or going to guides and brownies and fame dancing and, all sorts of crazy things that we did together, to then going up through our teenage years and, starting going out, to pubs and things, and just, we were just very close. I mean, when Jo went to university, that was a difficult time for us, and I have spoken about that. And I think it's one of the reasons that Jo cared so much about the issue of loneliness, because we went through a very lonely time, both in our different ways, having been so close. Yeah. And then, from a very normal northern working class background, she found herself in Cambridge in this totally surreal world. But in true form, she stuck it out, and she found her people, and she got on and she did amazing things there. But it was very difficult for us because, again, there were no mobile phones then. I don't think there was even email. There was nothing like that. So we would have conversations on the landline late at night, and we both really struggled. And then obviously she went off and did amazing things with her life. And eventually came back to her roots as the MP for Batley Spen, and we were all extremely pleased about that in terms of her coming home.
Yeah, absolutely. So you took very different paths in life. You're obviously different people, despite being very close as sisters. So what was it that got Jo into politics? Because clearly it wasn't sort of in the family blood.
No, we weren't an overtly political family, in that we wouldn't sit around the dinner table and talk about politics, but we were very focused on people and issues. So we would have conversations about, issues that mattered to us, but not necessarily through the lens of politics. Yeah. But everything that I think we both did in our careers was very much about people and very much about helping people. And there are lots of different ways in society of doing that. But I think once Jo went away to university, she became more political, and then she had various jobs, both in the voluntary sector, working in some of the most difficult countries in the world, whether that was, Syria or Sudan, or, going to areas where she saw huge inequalities and huge levels of violence, and she could see it from a global perspective. But also she worked for Glenys Kinnock in the European Parliament, so she had a really powerful political role model there who she absolutely loved. And then she worked for an MP, Joan Whalley, who was the MP for, I think, Stoke-on-Trent it was. So she sort of went on that political journey, and I think through that she realised that politics is one of the most important ways of making a difference to people, and one of the most important ways of helping people. And she went down that path. I took a very different path. I worked in education. I worked in the private sector actually initially in my career, and then I worked in education. I had my own business around health and well-being. And, you know, Jo would say to me, oh, you should get involved in politics. And I said, look, Jo, there's different ways of making a difference. And the students that I'm working with and the individuals that I'm working with, I know I'm making a difference to them in my own way. But I could also see, particularly watching Jo do the job, even though it was for far too short a time, the impact that politics can have. And, you know, the conversations that she was having people in our community, because I've lived in that area all my life, and the impact she had on people, and the way that she gave people hope and she connected with people. And that made me think, actually, politics, you know, gets a really bad press, but it can be a really powerful force for good.
Absolutely. Now, we are speaking on the about the 10-year anniversary of Jo's death. So, obviously, we want to be very sensitive around this, but can you tell me about that day?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't remember a huge amount about the day Jo was killed. Or indeed, I would say probably the 6 months afterwards, because I think your body and your mind have a very clever way of sort of protecting you. So it's a lot of a blur, but I had taken my car in for an MOT, and I thought I'll be nice and healthy and I'll jog down to pick the car up, and I ran down for the car, and then while I was picking the car up, my phone went, and I got a call telling me what had happened. And it was really bizarre that the guy at the garage, the mechanic, I said, oh gosh, something's happened to my sister. And he said, oh, I don't watch the news. It's too depressing. And I remember thinking, I don't blame you, mate. And anyway, then everything changed from that moment in time, and we drove to the hospital, and it's just, and it is all a blur. But I did know instinctively that it wasn't going to be okay. And that's a really strange thing to reflect on. And then I think I just sort of went into autopilot mode, because we had to get through, you know, when anybody loses anybody, there are certain moments that you have to get through and you have to try and process. Obviously the funeral is one of those things, but for us then we had a trial to contend with, because one thing that we haven't spoken about very much over the last 10 years is why Jo was killed. And we focused very much on creating a positive legacy for her, and what an amazing person she was and the values that she lived by, and then doing all the work through the Jo Cox Foundation and the great get-together about bringing people together and celebrating the many positive things that we have in this country. But Jo was killed because she was a Member of Parliament. She was killed because of her political values and beliefs and views by a neo-Nazi, by a right-wing fascist. And we don't talk about that individual, we never name him, but that is the reality of the situation. And it's hard for me to speak about that, and I haven't really done, but we have to look at the political climate and culture that there was in 2016, and we have to look at that now in 2026. And I think there are some serious questions that need to be answered by politicians, by society, by the media, by the social media companies, about what we do to push back on the division and the hatred and the anger. And I don't blame anyone for being angry about things. I'm angry about what's happened to my life. I'm really angry. But we've got a choice about what we do with that anger and that emotion. And we can try and do something positive and create, you know, something good, or we can shout at each other. And what does that actually achieve?
No, absolutely. And I think there are people who benefit from keeping us shouting at each other, rather than unpacking why we're angry and what we do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we've all got to decide whether we're MPs or councillors or journalists or, you know, whoever we are in society, do we want to be part of the problem or do we want to be part of the solution? And it's a no-brainer for me. We have to work together. And also that doesn't mean that we're going to agree on everything, you know. It's absolute, and the world would be a really boring place if we did.
I don't think there's a single human being I agree with on everything.
No, exactly. But A, let's try and find common ground where we can. And B, when we do disagree on things, let's try and do that with respect and with civility and with understanding of other people's positions, because we are all a product of our lives and whatever we've been through. And my reality is different to your reality, is different to anybody else's reality. But unless we are prepared to listen and try and empathise with why someone feels and thinks the way we do, then we're going to be in a really difficult place, because we'll never achieve anything.
So no one would wish for any of this to have happened this way, but there is a strong legacy that has come out of Jo's death. 10 years on, how do you reflect on that?
Yeah, look, despite the many challenges that we face as a country, and we can't pretend we don't face challenges, of course we do, and indeed internationally, globally, that, you know, we're seeing some really dreadful things happening in the world right now. But what I reflect on through Jo's legacy is the fact that there's also amazing positive things happening up and down the country in communities, day in and day out. And what we tried to do with the Great Get Together was give people an opportunity to celebrate some of those things. And what you tend to find is when people are given the time, the space and the opportunity to come together in a really positive way, they embrace it and they want to do it. So we've got the local legacy for Jo up in Batley Spen in West Yorkshire, where we have lots of events taking place. We have the Run for Jo, which happens every year on the Great Get Together weekend, where we get hundreds of people running through the woods. And it's not about the running, it's about the community, thank goodness. It's about the community, it's about coming together. We have live music, we have entertainment, we have food. You know, it's a fun family community event. And then different Great Get Together events across the whole country, often based around food, around music, around sport, around, you know, simple stuff like just checking in on your neighbours and having a cup of tea. So we do the Great Get Together at a national level. But then Jo's legacy is far and wide. I mean, I've done interviews recently with Canadian TV and journalists in Japan who want to talk about loneliness, an issue that Jo cared about passionately and championed when she was the MP. But then we went on to have the world's first ever Minister for Loneliness, Tracy Crouch, who became a good friend of mine. You know, the world's first ever government strategy on loneliness. And I now get contacted by countries from all over the world who see the UK as a trailblazer on this issue. And that is a really powerful legacy because Jo's name is associated with it. We've got lots of things, again, locally named after Jo. The sixth form centre at the grammar school that we went to in Hetman Dwight is the Jo Cox sixth form centre. And so students go in there and they know about Jo and they know about how a girl from a little town like that in the north of England went on to achieve so many amazing things. And then, you know, there are various things named after Jo, and it just gives us comfort as a family, but I think it also gives people the opportunity to reflect on the values that she held and that she lived by, and maybe think about what we can all do to try and embrace that sort of more in common ethos and philosophy, you know, in our day-to-day lives.
And you've obviously, you ran in the seat that Jo was previously MP for, though I know that boundary changes have changed that. And we've spoken before about some of the very difficult campaign that you went through. How does it feel? How do you become your own MP, as well as honouring Jo's legacy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, is when you lose someone you love, particularly under such horrific circumstances, or you lose a sibling, is your identity changes. So for me, there were only two of us, so I had a sister, and I suddenly became an only child, which was very strange. And suddenly, for many people, I was Jo Cox's sister, and I have never been more proud to be Jo Cox's sister. But a lot of people would refer to me in that way for the years afterwards, and indeed still do, which is absolutely fine for me. And when I was working at the Jo Cox Foundation, which I did for the first 5 years after Jo was killed, that was absolutely fine. But I had to create an identity for Kim as well in this new situation which I found myself in. You know, it's the same for my mum and dad. My parents like Jo Cox's mum and dad. You know, so it does strange things to you, I think, in terms of your identity. But then, as you say, when I became an MP, reluctantly, very reluctantly, it was then, well, you know, what does Kim Leadbeater, the MP, look like, as opposed to Jo Cox's sister, the MP? But actually, I can be both those things, and I want to be both those things. There is only one reason I'm here, and it's because of what happened to Jo. I mean, there is a world where she would have persuaded me to get involved in politics, and I could have ended up here.
I've met her.
Alongside, she probably would have persuaded me. Yeah. But you know, that isn't where we are. But I don't mind it at all when people speak to me about Jo, which they do pretty much every day, because that is the reason I'm here. This wasn't a path I would have necessarily chosen, but I am here. And I'm doing it to the very best of my ability under, you know, difficult circumstances for any MP these days. But Jo will always be with me, and you know, she would say, as she probably did to you and she did to many, many women, you should get into politics, you should do it, you know. And she tried that with me several times, and you know, maybe that would have worked at some point. But yeah, that identity thing I do struggle with, and it also, like I've said a few times, I don't enjoy the job. People say, oh, are you enjoying it? I'm like, no, I don't enjoy the job. But I also think there's something which I wouldn't deal with the guilt of enjoying this job, because there's only one reason why I ended up doing it. And that's without, this becoming a counselling session. But I do think that is a weird feeling. I shouldn't be here. I should not be here doing this job, because Jo should be here doing this job.
That's incredibly complex to live with.
Yeah, and I struggle with that. I struggle with that every day. But I then have to sort of, realign myself and think, well, Kim, you are here, and this is an incredibly privileged job to be in. It's a job where you can make a difference to people, and that's what you've always believed in. That's what Jo believed in. So get on with it.
And just finally, if you had one message to LabourList viewers, one thing that they could do to honour Jo's legacy and take things forward, what would that be?
So I would say anybody who wants to do something in Jo's memory can do that, however big or small it is. It could be doing something for the Great Get Together weekend. It could be checking in on your neighbours, organising a picnic or a street party, doing something in your local community. Or it could be putting yourself forward for public office. Politics needs good people. And Jo used to say that to me all the time. And we need people with the right moral compass. We need people with strong values. We need women in politics. We need people from all different backgrounds, all different areas, and I would say get involved in your community, whether that is, as I say, on a voluntary basis or through politics or whatever it is, and do your bit to make sure that you are part of the solution and not part of some of the problems that we're seeing at the moment.
Kim, it's been an absolute honour. Thank you so much for your candour and your openness and for talking to LabourList today.
Thank you very much.